Hello, fellow builders. Welcome back to the bench. Mediocre Model here, ready to start another project. It's not a build. It's not a rebuild. It's a re-rebuild. Let me explain. So what we're working on is the Death Star. And I'll have to say, now, so when most people think of the Death Star, they think of the Death Star 2. And I'll be honest, it's a lot more interesting to look at. It's not completed. It's just it opens the movie with you seeing this uncompleted Death Star. The Death Star 1 is just forgotten, but for its day, back in when the original Star Wars was released, man, that was the thing. That's no moon. That's a space station. It can't be. I mean, we were in awe of that thing. Now, AMT finally put a kit out in '98, and it was a very simple snap together kit. It was 8 wedged pieces, and it was like a top and a bottom, and it made basically a 9-inch basketball. And well, there's part of it. And there's the other part. Now, as I stand here with these two separate pieces, you could make the original idea, once it was separated, was to make this into the Death Star 2. And just, disassemble part of this and get that down there. And I decided, no. The first rebuild of this was, so you've got, that's how it mounts. And there was a little base, and it had like a little hook, and you would put it in there and it would sit like that. And it wasn't the greatest base. The hook thing broke, and I wanted to display it up on the wall. So I made a different base, and I put it up on the wall. And then I can't remember how I did, but I drilled a little stability hole. I think I had a little plate on there to keep it from, and it kind of wobbled and everything. And that wasn't great either. So the first thing I want to do is definitely I'm going to repaint it, because it's a nice shape, but it's just one color. It's just not really interesting to look at. But what I was going to also do is make a new mount, because I'm going to put it, which is the second part of this build, I want to put it up high. As a matter of fact, I want to put it right there. That's where it's going to live. But that's the first part, only the first part of the build. The second part of the build is going to be scale. Because you got these guys, right? And I mean, they're interesting. They're just the Bandai little Star Destroyers. They're not that big, right? Teeny tiny. But the thing about it is these two things are not in scale with each other. And that's the idea. So the idea was to get the Death Star built and put it there and figure out how far this needs to be away from that for these two pieces to be in scale. That's going to require some math. But I think we can do it. But first things first, we got to figure out what we're going to do for a mount, and we're going to have to get that repainted. So maybe we get it repainted first. Let's get a primer coat on there first, and then let's work on the mount. Deal? Deal. So, like I said, it's made of 8 wedges. There's the wedge there. And it looks like on the top part I did a pretty good of light blockage. I might have to, I guess I did it on both ends. Still might go back in and paint that black, but Again, wasn't very interesting. Just being one color. The seams coming together. I'm not going to focus too much on that. I'm really not. But we are going to give it a new paint job and just see where we are there. I couldn't help myself. After seeing how bad it looked after the first primer coat, I had to get in there with some Tamiya putty and fill those seams up. I'm also going in and re-scribing some of the lines. So let's get beyond this, and then we'll start working on the mount. For the base coat, I used the Tamiya Royal Light Gray. I agonized on how I wanted to do this because I wanted to make sure that I kept the individual lines in between the squares. So I settled on sponging it on. We're winging it here, guys. The second color we're using that we're actually sponging on is Tamiya Neutral Gray. I thought I was only going to have to sponge on the dark color, but if you dab too deep, you get it where you're not supposed to. So I cut down my sponge to make a smaller sponge, and I'm dabbing on the light gray in the deeper spots. Seems to be working well. The Death Star is still in two pieces, and I started thinking, in order to make the top and the bottom cohesive with the way I'm painting, maybe I need to work on the mount. So let me show you what I did with how we're going to mount this thing. The radius as close as possible without having to do a whole lot of sanding. And so that's the one part of it. The other part is going to be the Death Star, not the Death, the Imperial Cog. I had this piece already ready for another model. I just added a center post to allow mounting. I had been thinking about it. I should have put some holes in here for mounting on the wall to drill through that, but I'll just have to drill through the 3D print. So those are ready, and let's see how they came out. So here's my pieces. So I painted the Imperial Cog white. I went ahead and put a primer coat on it because when I tried to mark my holes where the mounting holes were on pencil, it wouldn't mark. But I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to do 3 or 4 holes. But this is going to be two-tone as well. So, well, and maybe I'll do the reverse on the mount then on the Death Star and have the recessed parts be the darker and the raised parts be lighter. Or maybe I'll just go completely off script and go maybe black and white. Ooh. I'll have to think about that. I'll have to think about it. But the idea is, so here's the piece that goes on the radius of the Death Star. Now, my concern was that I was going to just drill the 4 holes and put it on there, and then on the inside I was going to have lock washers. And then I was concerned that maybe that was too much stress on those 4 little points, and I wanted to spread the surface area around for mounting. So I just printed another one of these without that. And then here you have it, and it's got the thread. I put threaded inserts inside it, so the Death Star itself gets sandwiched in between the two, right? Like that. Now, what's going to hold all these pieces together? This is an elbow for just a piece PVC plumbing elbow. The idea is You get it on there at the angle you want. Now, granted, that's not on there, but it's going to hold it like that. And that's what I'm thinking. Every time I hold this half, I think R2-D2. Anyway, and that's why I was thinking about going ahead and assembling it so that I can just mount this on the desk and paint it as a whole. That way I'm looking at both the top half and the bottom half when I'm doing my gray painting. For some reason, I got the idea in my head that there was kind of a stopping point at the top and the bottom of the Death Star where you didn't see any gray. So that's why I've got that masked off. I'm going to have to double check that. I'm not sure if that's the case, but it's not like, you know, we ever see them fly over the top of the Death Star, for one. And for two, it's going to be so high up there, no one there's ever going to see it. So does it really matter? I don't know. But yeah, back to painting. Back to painting. This portion of the build is taking way longer than I expected. I worked as long as I could, then went to bed. Had to pick it up here in the morning. But this has given me time to think about the other part of this, scale. How big things are. And I took a little road trip. As a fan of sci-fi, I've always wanted to travel the solar system just to see what's in my own backyard. Now, I can't do that, but just in reference of scale, you could go and find something in your town like we have here. And it's a scale representation, a 1 mile scale representation of what our solar system, the distances are. So it starts off fairly simply with our very first location, the sun. We're here at the sun, and if we continue our trip to the left, we'll go on through the solar system. So, 7 steps, and we're at Mercury. And here's Mercury. The scale of Mercury compared to the sun, just there, is represented by this tiny little dot. 9 more steps, and we're at Venus. And here's Venus. And there's our dot. Earth. Dot. Mars. Dot. Here we are at the asteroid belt. And 63 steps down is Jupiter. Let's just find out. Well, that's disappointing. So we're standing at what should be Jupiter on our scale, and the sun is way up there. Well, we've made it to Saturn. Even though Jupiter's missing, it's up there, just over the top of the hill. And here we are at Uranus. Now, I think you can see it. That's right there, which is a fairly good-sized dot. And right up the street, just past, you can barely see the blue parking sign by the white car. That was Saturn. So here we are at Neptune, right there, and just up the street, well, we're getting far away, was Saturn. What? Uranus. And here we are at the end, absolutely. Look how teeny tiny that dot is. although deemed not a planet anymore. I don't care. That's what I was taught when I was raised many moons ago. This way it's gonna stay. But just compared to where we were, let's step out here in the street. You can see the top of that brown building up there. That was where the sun was. The Death Star has been assembled, painted, and mounted in place. That's part 1. So let's move over to the Star Destroyers, part 2. As a kit, the Star Destroyer is very simple to assemble. This is the second of the 2. I assembled it differently. The first time I primed all the pieces, then painted them, then assembled. But the paint was acting as a barrier when I went to assemble them on the it's a snap together kit. So on the eggs it was just clogging the snapping part. So this time I decided to build up the top half of the Star Destroyer, then take it in, prime it, and paint it, assemble, and weather. You're probably wondering why the Death Star is there and not there. The answer is math. Let me explain. The whole point of this exercise was to get the Star Destroyers, which, look at that. So, yeah, we got to figure this out. Anyway, get the Star Destroyers far enough away from the Death Star, all right, so the 2 are in scale. So, once I did the math, I'll go through the math with you. Double check my numbers. I've seen a couple of different numbers. I've seen that the Death Star is 120 kilometers, and I've seen it's 160 kilometers. Maybe that's the difference between Death Star 1 and Death Star 2. So we're going to go with 120 kilometers, which is roughly 75 miles. Okay. Star Destroyer is supposedly 1 mile long. Thank God the math is so far fairly simple. So if you measure this measures out to be about 4¼ inches. If this is 1 mile and the Death Star is 75 miles, it's 1/75. So you multiply the 75 times the 4¼ and that gives you 100 and do the math. The answer is right there. Okay. And then you take that number and you divide it by 12, which is feet, which would be, 12 inches in a foot. And that gives us like 26.52 feet. And I could just tell you, okay, that's 26 feet. But I thought it'd be more fun to show you what that looks like out in the wild. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Death Star with me. And I'm going to take I need to make a little mount to hold this. And then we're going to go out in the world and find places where we can set this up. And the Death Star is there, and the Star Destroyer is here. And these 2 are in scale at 26.56 feet apart. Unfortunately, this room isn't 26.56 feet big. So look for that. But in the meantime, at least the Death Star's done. Star Destroyers are, see that, you're supposed to be going the same direction. I think I'm going to shorten this up and figure out, how close these two should be together so they're in like formation. I like the diagonal, so that you'll see them both traveling towards the Death Star together. I'll figure it out, because right now they're going to crash. Oh my God. Pew 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 pew.